the agenda?
I move.
Jeff, seconded. McKaylee, all in favor?
And may I ask, did we add the additional item that Will wanted on the agenda, Steph?
Excellent point.
No,
So-
but we can put it in new business, other business.
Okay,
And that's a Mount Gardner update. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
oh, and David's here. All right, we'd had predictions that you had a little further to go.
Well, I stopped at Municipal Hall. There's no bus running across the island right now, so.
All right. Okay, and we also have David Adams, so I'm going to have to say David last names as well when I'm addressing people. Okay, so adoption of the minutes. Last, do I have a motion?
Yeah.
Did I get a motion?
Sure. Move.
Okay. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public comments, none. And so delegations, David Adams, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate being here. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah.
All right. So carry on with your delegation.
Okay. So I'm representing Thrive Bowen, and Thrive was a recipient of a couple grants from the municipality last year, and we're just finally wrapping up our reports. We've gotten the final report from Jay Mather, who is looking at what we call the non-soil based options for greenhouses and agricultural technology. So we have that report. We also have received the report from KPU. We are just now discussing it within our group, making final changes and just kind of making the last adjustments, and then it will be ready for public consumption, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. We also have hired David LePage and Bisocial Canada, which is a group out of the Lower Mainland they're global experts in social procurement and social governance, social enterprise. And so we've been consulting with them in terms of whatever we come up with from our reports, whatever the findings are, if we want to move forward with them, what do we do? Like, what might be our options? Do we form a society? Do we form a social enterprise? Do we create a cooperative? So they're also helping us look at demand side. Specifically, if we, for example, if we were to engage and buy a freight farm containerized vertical garden system, we're going to be producing a lot more produce than perhaps can be produced on Bowen, especially because we don't want to compete with the farms. We want to create a supportive culture for all and a culture of local shopping, buying. So what is the external markets off island that we might need to tap into, for example, the downtown east side or other resources there or opportunities there that would then allow something like a freight farm, vertical farm to be able to be financially viable on island. Before I kind of go into it, I'd like to just ask, so my understanding is I'm done in about 20 minutes. And I want to hold time for questions or to make sure that I'm providing the committee the information that you want and are wondering about, because I could go on for an hour, honestly, about this. So are there specific areas that you're curious about or want to know about, preliminary findings? Is there anything that I can kind of narrow in on as opposed to just going off from the beginning in the chronological order and summarizing where we've been for the last year and a half?
One thing that comes to mind is you mentioned KPU when you were talking, and can you remind us what KPU stands for?
Sorry, speaking in acronyms.
Yeah.
KPU is Kwantlen Polytechnic University. They have an Institute for Sustainable Food Systems there. They are doing our on-site analysis and our soil-based greenhouse option analysis. They've also done an analysis of the ALR land on Bowen Island to determine what the potential is of that ALR land theoretically. So maybe it might be useful just to contextualize everything. Our mission at Thrive was to look at how do we substantively move the needle on food resiliency and security on Bowen Island. That was our primary goal. Not move it at 1% or 2%, but how can we really address the issue in light of what's been happening over the last year with floods and fires and being cut off from the rest of Canada, and also what's potentially what we're looking at in the next 5 to 10 years, or perhaps even the next 5 months. So what can we do as an island to start taking that responsibility of food resiliency very seriously and saying, what can we do? So we went at it with the question of, okay, is agri-tech even possible on Bowen? Is that a viable option? And also we kind of expanded the question, say, what is our potential even just as is? And I think I can share with you now, and it will be in the report that, and I'll just read it out to you. So Bowen Island, what they've assessed at KPU is that Bowen Island's ALR is 425 acres. It represents 2.7% of Bowen Island's total area. And according to agricultural land use inventory, there are 51.4 acres of ALR land on Bowen Island classified as available for farming, but are currently in a natural or semi-natural state. So what they then did, so 51.4 acres of ALR land available for farming. That doesn't mean it's not under private control or that there wouldn't have to be a lot of clear cutting or et cetera, et cetera. It just means that there are 51.4 acres available. What they then did was look at what would be the theoretical land requirements to produce 11 staple crops. And I can go into what those crops were. They're, things like potatoes and leeks, and I'd have to go take a look at the list. I forget, my memory is slipping right now. But anyways, to produce those 11 staple crops for all 4,000 plus residents on Bowen, without greenhouses, this is just the land usage, is 28.4 acres, with another 9.4 acres of support facilities such as housing, barns, washing stations, roadways, et cetera, that would be needed. So the total acreage to create 11 continuous staple crops for all 4,000 plus residents of Bowen Island is roughly 37.8 acres. And we have 51.4 theoretically available. So that's one of the analysis they looked at. So I thought that was pretty exciting. I mean, it is theory and there's a lot of ifs and kind of potential obstacles in the way, but there's also a very clear opportunity that if Bowen wants to address food security and food resiliency in terms of those 11 crops, that doesn't mean caloric intake. We recognize that. We're not saying that it's a panacea for the whole situation, but it potentially could go far to addressing the question of food resiliency, whether it moves the needle 5%. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. A major question here is the type of agriculture that they're foreseeing. Are they foreseeing heavy use of pesticides and fertilizers in this model, or are they looking at a more what's the term that's being used in the agricultural group here on Bowen, permaculture and that kind of thing, with very low inputs of chemicals, because we're looking at the influence on water supply, both groundwater and surface water that would run off from this type of practice. So there's my question.
Great question. Great question. I can't answer that specifically. I would have to go through and actually read the report. My guess, and I've only to date skimmed the report. But my guess is, given who the KPU Institute is, and given the whole practices of regenerative agriculture, and that as a group we've also stressed that. I mean, we're not like BIFs where it's like that's what we're doing. We're open to tech and we're open to alternatives, but we too are moving towards more regenerative. I would venture to say that that would be low impact if regenerative practices, more towards that end of the spectrum than heavy use pesticides, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a great question, and I'll go through the report and I'll come back on that question. I can't do it today, obviously, but I will come back with the group on that.
Any other questions from members?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Maureen?
Yeah,
Hi,
hi,
Maureen.
David. Two questions.
Yes.
One is, what is it that you're looking for from this group other than ensuring that we're better informed? And second, is your presence here related to an application to the federal local food infrastructure program? I kind of want to push us towards what your ask might be.
Thank you, Maureen, because I was invited to speak about the group. So I think it's mutual. I think the group I was invited from the group to speak. And I'm glad to be keeping you informed of it. But so thank you for the invite to open this conversation. One of the things that we are looking at is, where do we go next? And there are a couple options that are kind of popping their heads up. And we still have to talk internally with the group and also with David LePage and Biosocial Canada about this. But the two most realistic next steps for us would be one, a system of a tower system of ag tech growing, which would be available to residents, schools, commercial usage, cooperative usage, muni usage, farm usage. Basically what they are vertical towers about 8 feet tall that can grow between 25 and 40 plants. I believe they're aeroponics. The company that is putting it out has a long history, a decent history, and has developed relationships with schools, has school guides, communities. They've worked with communities. So it could be one way that we engage the community and build resiliency by basically teaching people to fish. That old adage, you can give people fish and they can eat once, or you can teach people to fish and they can feed themselves. And so that would be one way. And we are still exploring with the company that option. In that case, the support of the Muni would be, what you would want, but, it could be as simple as being our partner on the grant or allowing us to run the grant through you, because we do need an official non-for-profit to apply for the grant to the federal government. And just to summarize what the federal government is, they're willing to pay upwards of 75% of agriculture food production technology, anywhere between 100,000. The request has to be anywhere between 100,000 and 500,000. We're not asking the Muni for money in either case that I'm about to present, but we would be asking the Muni for either support, moral support, a letter of support, or perhaps support in the terms of running the grant through the municipality, because like I say, we do need some sort of nonprofit organization or municipality to run the grant through. So that is one option, the tower system. And I can get back to more information. And the kind of the larger blue sky, larger overview on that would be providing these towers to residents and to the schools, whomever was interested in participating, such that we could develop community food resiliency through the residents themselves. And I can expand on that if I'm not clear, but at this level, I'm just wanting to summarize. The other option would be something like a freight farm vertical garden. So if you imagine one of those containers down at the port of Vancouver, the land request would be between 10 feet and 50 feet long. It would be needing an electrical hookup, and it would be needing a water supply within 50 feet. And basically what these vertical gardens are is inside that container are vertical gardens that grow thousands of vegetables. Now, some work better than others, and the most primary ones that work the best are leafy greens, herbs, and maybe some other small ones. Now, we could theoretically adjust that to grow seedlings or other vegetables, but we would be looking at buying a vertical garden system through Freight Farm, and then we would need somewhere to park it. And the question that we have had and have is there any municipal land that would be available on which we could place this containerized vertical system? Now, just to be clear, this would not be privately owned. This would be a community-owned system, and but it would be commercial. It would be a community-owned commercial system. What is community-owned? Well, that's something we would need to look at in more detail, whether that would be a social enterprise, a co-op. That's what we're getting and hiring David LePage and Bisocial Canada to help us figure out. But we do know it would be some sort of community-owned, whether that's 100 families owning it or 1,000 families owning it. That is to be determined. But we are looking potentially to apply for this grant, which would end, the end date for applications is July 15th. So I realize the timeline is quick. There's probably a lot of questions coming up, I can imagine. I probably haven't been that clear in explaining both options of what we're looking at. But the biggest question, one of the questions we have now is even in theory, any land potentially available from the Muni on which we could park this 10 by 50 vertical garden system, containerized system. So that's to Maureen, that's to answer your question.
Thank you. Just one follow-up. I'm really bad at visualizing measurements. So 10 by 50, what is that? Is that a school bus?
So if you can picture one of those containers at the Port of Vancouver that come on the ships.
So
add probably around another foot or two around it, and that's the size.
Okay, thank you.
And I expect that this is like a demonstration, because it's certainly not going to feed the entire island of Bowen Island by any stretch. And so how do you see this proceeding?
So great question. What we're wanting to do is not have our report or funders' money simply be parked in the dustbin of all of reports. We want to take action on it, and we want to take action on it as soon as possible. So one of the things that we are looking at is how might we do that? Like, what could be small next steps that we move forward with? Also included in these reports are, for example, KPU analyzed 5 sites that were indicative of Bowen Island. It was also 5 sites that were open to us doing the analysis. We did approach a variety of farms, and we approached the Muni about having them included in the site analysis. Some said yes, some said no. And so what we're looking at is these 5 site analyses as potential opportunities, but also potential examples of what we're dealing with on Bowen Island in terms of topography, water, all of that. So there are some options, other options that have been outlined in the reports. There have been some sites identified as potential sites for other developments. There's also timelines that go with them that aren't necessarily right now. Some of them are years out, like such as Bow and Wild. Some might be a year or two out, such as our conversations with Arbutus Ridge, where they have 10 acres already zoned and approved for farming and other related activities. And part of the report was to work with the Muni and potentially farms and those holders of that ALR land to say, what can we do here now? There is the potential for this food resiliency on island to be substantively moved forward by accessing that ALR land. Let's have a conversation about it. So that's one thing that we want to do. And we're going to make that recommendation. Let's have a conversation.
I see Bonnie's got her hand up.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Hey, Bonnie.
Thank you for being here. I just want to know how you interface with BIFs, as you know, some of your mandate, overlap, given that they do have the garden there at Grafton Lake. Just wondering what your relationship with them.
Right. So great question. One of the sites that was picked to be analyzed was Grafton Commons. So we've been in ongoing conversations with BIFs around the report from KPU. BIFs is very adamant of following regenerative practices. We've asked them if we could potentially house a freight farm containerized system at the Commons, and they've said no. And they've given their reasons for it, and we're totally okay with that. We understand. It is kind of contrary to their mandate and their mission to advance regenerative practices and soil-based practices. But we're going to continue working with them in whatever way we can. And we do foresee potential opportunities coming forward in the future that we will also look to in the report, but they are one of the 5 sites that were analyzed. Does that answer your question, Bonnie?
Yeah, that's great, David. And just as a follow-up question to that,
Sure.
when will the report be ready?
So there's 3 aspects to the report. One aspect is Jay's report, which is looking at the non-soil based. That report is finished. KPU's report is just being reviewed internally right now. We expect that to be done within the next week or so. And then from that, we are going to talk to David LePage and By Social, continue those conversations. They will then make a final report on what their recommendations are. I suspect that will be 2 to 3 weeks. Let's call it from this point, probably 3 to 4 weeks. And then we will be looking at writing up our overall recommendations. And so given that, probably 6 weeks from right now. So we're in almost like 7th. So what's 6 weeks? Kind of a little past mid-July is when we expect the whole entire report to be available to be shared. Now, if somebody on the committee wants a preview, then we can look at that and we could potentially share that. But it is a preview and it's a draft version and it's confidential, and it would not be at all for public consumption because we don't want confusion whereby drafts go out and the final version might be slightly different, or but it would be only for internal consumption for the committee. And that's that. I mean, I could share this report as it is right now, but it's as I say, it's a draft version and there will be changes.
Yeah, just a question. I'm just thinking about timeline wise and your ask,
Right.
The grant, and
right.
Because in the process as staff here for quite some time, sort of the process that I see is that, the report would we'd want to bring it to council, but we want to have some sort of paper with it because, just to make sense of it and to tease out what's being asked of council. So I guess that's why I'm looking at the timeline of the grant being July 15th. it just seems like the timing doesn't quite, but maybe like, have you inquired that maybe there'll be another intake for that grant?
I believe there is next year, but one of the things that will happen is we're meeting with Buy Social Canada this week. At that meeting, we're going to make decisions about which direction we want to go in. So even though the reports may not be finalized, we could have enough information once we have decided which direction we want to go in, like one of those two options or neither, but I'm hoping one of those two options, by which we could then come to you and council and say, here's where we want to go. Here is our formal ask. And here's all the background materials as much as we can provide with that ask and that application. So that is something we hope on Thursday, our meeting will be that we will be clear about where we're going. And then it's just a matter of providing the necessary documentation and so that your process can happen on the timeline that you need.
Any other questions from committee members? Oh, David.
Yeah. Thanks, David. So you just said you're going to decide quickly on one of your two options, and the options you mentioned to us were both of the basically the vertical farming options. Is that correct? I mean, as I understand what you've got here, you've got an analysis of the ability for soil-based agriculture to basically feed Bowen. It's, through its 11 of these staples. You've also looked at an array of locations on Bowen and to see what could be done there. And you've also looked at a couple of high-tech options for vertical farming. But what you want to proceed on is one of the vertical farming options. If that sounds like what you said, is that correct?
No, it is somewhat, but David, so we've looked at a number of options. We have a number of options ahead of us, but those options are in various timelines. So one of the options that we are looking at is definitely the vertical farming. So in that correct, it is, you're correct. The other option is not vertical farming, it's tower farming. So if you can imagine a plastic tower that's probably, and I can send you the link, it's about 8 feet tall, and it has outshoots where plants will grow, and then a base where the system is, the growing system. But it can fit in your home. It can fit in your kitchen. It could fit, 4 of them or 8 of them could fit in a classroom or outside. They're really small towers that, a more commercial operation might have 50 of them. Okay. A resident might have 1. And so what we're thinking is, can we buy these on bulk and then sell them at a reasonable cost to the community, or work with schools to create programs around these towers to help push food resiliency within the individual homes and schools, so that it's not about us leading the charge, it's about the community coming together around this initiative. That's the second option at this point.
Okay, I misunderstood your description.
Sorry, I didn't communicate that clearly.
That was me not understanding it properly, because those were the two that I was thinking of. Okay, so really what you're going to need, though, also is a big community engagement around this report, because what you've done is provided a bunch of options for Bowen, and not simply ones that your group could do, but all kinds of people could do. But okay, all right, good, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've got a question about these two systems you're talking about. Are they dependent on artificial light? When you're talking about the size of a shipping container, is it like an enclosed space that is using artificial light?
Correct. So the freight farm system, which is the vertical farming containerized system, absolutely artificial light. The other system, the tower systems, can be outdoors or indoors. Indoors, then you might want to supplement with light, depending, seasonal, et cetera, but you might want supplemental lighting. Or outdoors, obviously, you don't.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Marie,
Yeah, again, a comment and a question. Some years ago, we had a fellow on island, and I'm just wondering if what I'm remembering is consistent with the tower model. His name was Wayne, and he ran Black Cat Farms and
Right.
had set up at least one building that I saw where he was growing in towers, and he had a number of other things on his property. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about, David? Do you-
Maureen, I can't speak directly because I know of Black Cat Farm, but
Right.
I was never there, and so I don't know the system, so I can't say yes definitively that was. I mean, I can. You know what? If you, I realize I'm over time, and I am going to just do this. If you can bear with me for.
Are you going to share screen?
Nope. I'm going to. Well, actually, I could share a screen. What I was going to do is just show you the system, or I can just put it into the comments, and you can look at your own on your own time.
I think that would be best. I think the other thing that we need to, to get to a point where we can recommend anything to council is, I think we'll have to see some of those reports.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll get them to as close to finish as possible, and yeah.
Yeah, and get them to Steph, and she can distribute them as needed. I think that's as far as we can go with any support that.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'll do now is I'll put the two systems that we're looking at. We haven't made a decision on either one.
Yeah, and if you've got a plus and minuses, if you've been evaluating them and what criteria you're using to evaluate them, that'll help us too.
Okay, I'll definitely provide that. Okay, super.
If I could make one more suggestion.
Sure.
Just a suggestion. The folks who had the presentation on the funding program were very pleasant and approachable. Yeah. And I wonder if it might make sense, David, to get in touch with them and see how firm that July 15th date is.
Right.
And see what they can tell you about how things have gone so far, because this is the first iteration of this program, is my understanding. And sometimes they need to fine tune deadline applications and so on. So it might be worth a phone call.
Okay. Great idea.
All right. Well, David, thank you for taking the time to engage with us on this. It looks like a very exciting project you're working on. So thank you.
Thank you for the invite and for the opportunity to share what we've been doing. Really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any final comments from people? Shall we move on?
I would like to mention that I think one of the reasons for inviting David was so that we could see how the grant funding was utilized, and I think we saw that, and a very interesting and exciting initiative. And while hopefully David maybe will get this message if he looks back on YouTube, I don't know. My compliments to the group on what they've done, and it's going to start a really interesting discussion and dialogue about this. So I can't wait to see where the conversation goes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jeff. So council referral. Daniel, are you around? Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
Take it away, please.
Okay. Okay, so council referral, which is a policy called a conservation development policy. And so council has referred it to the ECAAC to see what comments and recommendations you may have for council. So this was a policy that, if we cast our minds back, that council initially tasked the Advisory Planning Commission with drafting, and the APC drafted a policy that was presented to council in November of 2019 and was referred to committees through 2020. So the Environment Climate Action Committee did provide recommendations in March of 2020, so some time ago now. And quite extensive comments that were quite, fairly in-depth and quite useful. So staff collected all the various comments from all of the committees and brought that report to council in a report that was dated November 2021, but for various reasons kept getting deferred and ended up being discussed at a committee of the whole in February of 2022, so a few months ago. And the council direction at that point, based on the feedback received from this committee and a number of committees, was a goal to essentially simplify the conservation development policy to focus its application to rezoning applications and focus on building on existing OCP policies and objectives. So staff have redrafted the policy and presented it to council at the May 25th meeting, at which point it was referred again to the ECAAC and to the Advisory Planning Commission. So what I'll do now is essentially just go through the policy, the different components that go into the policy, and then happy to take questions at the end. So the policy objective is to apply to all rezoning applications outside of the Snug Cove Village. And so it's to incorporate conservation development principles and achieve a goal of nature needs half. So then it goes purpose. So it's to guide council's evaluation of land use bylaw amendments, so rezoning applications. It's to implement policies from the official community plan that promote cluster development, protection of environmentally sensitive areas, and development consistent with the principles of conservation development. And so then the secondary purpose is to serve as a guide for applicants and staff to determine how council will evaluate applications for land use bylaw amendments. So that's something staff looks for and applicants look for, is what's council looking for in a rezoning application? How am I achieving OCP policies? So this policies help to guide applicants and staff as well. So then the guidelines has this preamble, so it's meet the challenges of climate change, preservation of green space and environmentally sensitive areas, and to manage proposed development. So all rezoning applications outside of the Snug Cove Village boundary, in addition to other municipal policies and bylaws, will be evaluated on the basis of, and then essentially there's 3 points that form the meat of the policy. So it's basis of an analysis of existing natural features and environmentally sensitive areas present on the proposed development site, incorporation of conservation development principles with a goal that a minimum of 50% of the total land subject to the rezoning application is protected from further development. Priority is to be given to protection of any identified environmentally sensitive areas. And the third mechanism, or third guideline, the means by which the protection is to be provided. This may be through mechanisms such as parkland dedication, protective covenants, or other means deemed appropriate by council. The policy then lists some OCP policies and objectives that I don't have in this presentation, but they're there in the policy. And then it contains 4 definitions that are used in the policy, 3 of which are taken directly from the OCP. And the 4th one being the definition for conservation development. So implementation of land development that seeks to protect biodiversity, farmland, ecosystem services, scenic landscapes, and historic and cultural resources, as well as maintain the character of rural communities. This is achieved by identifying and permanently protecting ecologically sensitive areas and other green space. Development is then built around the protected areas. So cluster development is the grouping of lots or single family dwellings in a location on a parcel without increasing the permitted density of lots or dwellings. And the remaining area that's not developed is created as green space. And then environmentally sensitive areas or lands or waters containing ecosystems and habitats that are fragile or rare or ecologically important because of the biological diversity they support and are sensitive to human disturbance. And then list some examples of ESAs on Bowen. And then green space is any area that should be maintained in perpetuity because of its environmental, educational, scientific, recreational, or aesthetic qualities, and may include trails, parks, reserves, natural forests, wetlands, and other lands set aside. And so that's the end of walking through the policy, and then I'm open for any discussion or questions the committee has.
Thanks, Daniel. Any comments or questions from board members? I'll be the penguin off the ice shelf then. Daniel, I'm wondering if as another objective that I think could be included in this is maintenance of biodiversity. And the way that can be done is that as well as looking for lands that are environmentally sensitive, the planners and council could be looking for land that is donated to be part of an ecological corridor. And if you need a definition of ecological corridors, I've got one that I can send you. Parks Canada has a very nice one. Basically, it's the idea of an ecological corridor is to maintain a corridor that animals, plants, seeds, and spores can disperse to reduce fragmentation of habitat and development of the island effect, in where small bits of environmentally sensitive areas are isolated from all the other ones, so that if there's a drought or something like that, that little wetland might not, the species might not, some species might not survive, but they can be repopulated by creatures, plants, spores, and seeds traveling down that ecological corridor from other ecologically sensitive areas. So
that's great. And Will, that I didn't go through the OCP policies that I have in this policy, but the one that's listed there, policy 350, talks about preventing fragmentation of the natural habitat.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a similar concept, right? It's about making sure that those are protected. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the idea of ecological corridors is essential to do that.
Yeah.
So that when somebody's looking at a plot of land and they say, well, I'm looking for an environmentally sensitive area that I'm going to set aside, that might not be there, but it might be that the property next door has a wetland, and the one on the other side of that property has a wetland. It would be really useful to make that ecological corridor happen. So I think that's a useful addition.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Don?
Is it possible to read a copy of the draft?
Yeah, it's
a link in the report.
Yeah.
Link in the agenda.
Sorry, so 5.1b on the agenda is the staff report, and then the policy is the attachment at the end of the report.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And I'm just wondering, is McKaylee still here, or did she have to leave?
She's just popped out to pick up her kids. She should be back in a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just always interested in Jeff and McKaylee's input, because they're professionally involved in this kind of thing. So, okay, Bonnie.
I just wanted to bring up, I know this committee has seen the site alteration bylaw. It came forward to our last meeting, and I feel that this policy works well with that bylaw, because right now, in theory, a large swath of land could be cleared, and then by the time it comes forward for consideration by council, there may not be that ecological integrity still on the land. So I think that the conservation policy with the site alteration bylaw, with whatever iteration that ends up being in the end, is the tandem will work well to preserve ecosystems on Bowen Island.
Yep. Daniel, I've got another question. How big of a property is eligible for consideration for conservation development? Is it down to a single lot that is going to be developed, or is there a threshold for this?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we discussed at some length with the APC last night, because right now, as it's currently written, it would apply to, it just says to all rezoning applications. So there isn't a threshold. Something that came up at the council meeting was discussion of like, what about rezoning applications that aren't actually, you know, maybe they're not increasing development potential, they're not increasing really use, but it's like I don't know, if you think of like a commercial operation in the middle of the island, it is altering their permitted uses. You know, is that the type of thing that would trigger this? And we'd say, well, probably not, but you know, do we want to include language somehow in there that makes sense? But in theory, this would be, you know, somebody with one lot wants to rezone so they could subdivide to two. This would apply. Something we've talked about with council too is that it does get more challenging on a lot that sort of is already developed. So you could think of like a long, narrow lot with the house at one end and the road access at the other, and a driveway that comes through and a septic field and a well and whatever else. It gets challenged. It's much harder then to say, you know, the undisturbed land will become a park if it's like, well, there's a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and that's what's left. It's hard to figure out how you're implementing it in that point. And so I think there needs to be sort of, it's like, it's hard to work into the policy, and the more it's like a council site specific sort of understanding of what's working and what we're trying to protect.
In such a situation, would it be possible for the landowner to give a cash donation to offset that development?
Yeah. Yes, I think like we would take amenity contributions that are cash. I'm sort of hesitant to put it in the policy, because it's like the idea being, well, that's our second choice.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that would steer some things just to if you got enough money, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. I agree. It gets more complex as you think about it, doesn't it? As I'm sure you've been looking at it in much more detail than us.
And I just put in the chat just the PDF. It's just the policy itself, the draft policy at this point, if that's helpful for people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is it time for a motion?
I think David's got his hand up there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, David.
Yeah, I liked Will's comment about ecological corridor. And if you look at the policy, and I've just got the policy up on my page, I was looking at it, you know, it would be included, as Daniel said, if you sort of read through all the details, that would be included. But I'm thinking of the perspective of the developer who is, okay, I need to protect around half of my site. What things do I look for? And I think by putting a few things like ecological corridor and also the trail network, like you're, okay, I'm going to divide this land up. And you don't just sort of think, what do I look for in terms of what I protect? Well, are there trails I can connect to? Or the idea that you presented, Will. And I think by putting a bit more of the things that we would be looking for into the definitions, I think that's where it goes. I had it up on my screen, but now I'm in Zoom looking at everybody. I think that just might help, just to make it easier for people to know, okay, what's the municipality looking for here? And as I said, ecological corridor would already be included if you read it carefully and you knew what you were looking for and you understood, you know, what all the definitions were and you'd read the OCP thoroughly and stuff like that. But most people haven't. So that's why I was suggesting add a little bit more in there that covers some of these things.
Okay, I see Jeff has his hand up and Maureen has her hand up.
Well, David perhaps maybe covered a little bit of what I was going to ask, and that is how do you foresee, Daniel, the identification of the environmentally sensitive areas to be handled? And you know, I appreciate we've visited the idea of ESAs in the past and with previous initiatives. But can you share your thoughts around that, and maybe it's simply around providing some definitions around what those environmentally sensitive areas might be. But anyway, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like one answer would be, I think the starting place is like whenever I meet with people about potential rezonings for their sites, it's looking at things like the environmentally sensitive area map that's in our 2010 OCP and our parks and trails that identifies desired trails and park locations. So typically I start with those two documents in terms of looking at people's site and saying, okay, we've already flagged, this is a sensitive area on your site and this is a desired park or this is a desired trail connection, and starting from that point. But I think ultimately then that second guideline, the second bullet point that says an analysis of existing natural features in environmentally sensitive areas, it is in essence that we would be looking for a report as part of the application from a QEP that identifies the sensitive areas. And so we'd be saying, for the applicant, they would be providing that, and that would form the basis of that initial staff report and council discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Just a follow up. Thanks. Does the municipality have any terms of reference for environmental assessments, or yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we have a terms of reference for environmental assessments for development permits.
Yeah,
which are most common. So sort of lists like what we look for in a report. Yeah, and then we do have our development procedures bylaw. It does contain the ability for us to seek, I forget what it's called, but it's called like a peer review study. But essentially it provides us the ability to seek another registered professional at the applicant's cost to provide a report that the municipality commissions. So if somebody applied for a rezoning and they supplied a report that we sort of questioned the conclusions of or questioned the thoroughness of, the ability exists for staff in reviewing the application to seek another report.
Okay, all right. So that can kind of work in a complementary way with this policy already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Maureen?
Thanks. I guess I just want to say I'm really pleased with the direction that this policy took, the simplifying it so that we no longer sort of had all sorts of things embedded in it that were actually addressed elsewhere. And I wonder, Daniel, if you could just recap for the committee where you see the value lying in having this policy in your dealings with people who are interested in rezonings.
I think it's really valuable to set the expectations for people as they're envisioning rezoning. So like I'll often meet with people who will say, well, I'm zoned for whatever it may be. I have a 5-acre parcel. It's zoned for 2.5, but in the OCP, its zoning is such that I could, or its designation is such that I could rezone and I could have 2 lots. And sort of the expectation for people then is that, I would take my 5 acres, I'd rezone it, and I'd have 2.5-acre lots, and I would proceed like that. So it's helpful to sort of set the stage and expectation for people to say, no, what we're seeking for is that to rezone to meet the OCP density, the expectation is that we're protecting some of it, that it's not just, going from 5 acres to 2.5 acres, and then maybe, at some point it'll go to 1-acre lots or something. But that it's like, no, you should focus on, okay, you should do the analysis at this point. You should cluster the development in a smaller part of the overall lot, and the rest is the expectation is that it be protected.
Thank you.
The other thing that I think will be useful in the future is when we get a natural assets inventory, that will help greatly in you being able to make decisions about things like an ecological corridor, or joining this little bit of wetland with the adjacent wetland on the property next door and that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to the future when you have more tools.
Yes. Yeah.
Michaeli, do you have any input on this? That you've been away, I know, and we're still talking about Daniel's report on the cluster development. I just missed the right term. Conservation development. Do you have any comments from your position working with developers and things like that?
I think I'll have to decline comment at this point. I'm feeling woefully unprepared.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to read the document, and I missed Daniel's presentation. I'm so sorry.
You're a busy woman. We appreciate all that you can give, so thank you. So I guess that the next thing is a motion.
So I just have the one comment then.
Yep.
Do you want me to share screen?
Yep.
Can you see it?
Yeah, it's
Does that sound right?
yeah, you are such a godsend that you compose these while we talk, and so it moves things quickly. Any comments from the committee?
Now, what about David's suggestion around some greater specificity or detail around what some of those environmentally sensitive areas, how they might be defined? Am I paraphrasing that right, David?
I think, well, I really liked, I think just trying to help developers along. And I think the idea of the ecological corridor and the human corridors, the trail linkages, were the two that I was really thinking about. Because that's just something that people might not think of. And I find the ecological corridor is such a nice evocative term.
So that's here, Jeff. Can you see it?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
That sounds good. Yep. Okay.
I can reword it if.
No, good.
Like.
I don't see that. It's good.
Okay. Do we have a motion for this? Who?
Happy to do it.
Okay. Now I can't see everybody
here
on my screen, so okay, now I can. Do we have a motion?
David moved it. We need a seconder.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second it. Jeff? More discussion?
Nope, I was just seconding.
Okay. Seconded by Jeff. And all in favor?
Okay.
Well, Rebecca, do you have anything to add? I haven't asked you anything. No, okay.
No, I don't. Thank you, though. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Daniel, I think we can set you free. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. If it's okay with the committee, I'll just stay for Greg's next piece.
Okay. Great.
Hello.
Hi, Greg.
I just got to get my video back on. Hey, there I am. Hello, everyone.
Well, welcome.
How's Theo?
He's doing well.
Yeah, I haven't seen him about 10 years. I taught him a long time ago.
Yeah. He's at U of T now doing a PhD in medical biophysics.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly what I thought he'd be doing. Okay, so how can I help you today?
So, water conservation mechanisms.
So we invited Greg to come because there had been much discussion about opportunities for, was it cisterns or catchments, or many discussions. And then finally it was decided that we would bring the guy in who makes or knows all the rules and enforces all the rules and get the real skinny from Greg. That's my recollection.
Yeah, water catchment, rainwater catchment was the primary discussion. I had lots of questions about that. So if that's what you would like me to cover, I did dig into some code requirements. I think I've passed on to the committee about being able to use rainwater collection that's untreated within a dwelling or other building using a purple pipe system. It's definitely encouraged in many ways through building department, but we can't enforce any of it at the time being without any covenants, etc. But that's definitely an option. And there are ways to look at new buildings and also retrofitting existing buildings to incorporate rainwater collection. Some are already doing it on their own terms, but definitely we could do it within the code. They would be restricted, of course, to irrigation, but it could also be used for flushing of toilets. And one strict use could be through laundry if the laundry does not have a hot water connection. So not a hot water connection to the unit at all, not just turned off. Because the primary reason why you have to have separate piping is so there's no possibility of cross-contamination of the water systems with potable. Because it could affect the dwelling, it could also affect, if you're connected to a water system, it could affect them as well. So there are some plumbing, mechanical adjustments you can do to help protect that. But that's definitely an option. But I'm also want to hear questions from you so I can help direct or give some feedback of how you might be able to use it in your either in your communications or education, etc. I think that'd be a good place to go next if you had questions.
Okay. What about treatment of that water? What are the regulations about that? Can it be legally treated and used for other uses?
Yeah. So if you're suggesting for potable water use,
sure,
it can be done. This is more recent provincial guidelines that have come out. There have been some national, federal ones previously that may have been an option, and projects that have done that have used registered professionals to design systems for it. But it sounds like now the ministry wants to be able to provide the opportunity for users and property owners to develop their own smaller systems. And there are some guidelines and also acceptance of the national guidelines for treatment of the water. There are higher risks because it's above ground risk and water that could be affected by organisms and otherwise, a lot more so. But the province has finally brought that into something a little more common. So then Vancouver Coastal Health, our contact, is more familiar with it and can work with people to develop that along with the water professionals. We want to rely on them.
Yeah. One of the things that I think came up in our discussions earlier was there was a misunderstanding that we thought that Vancouver Coastal Health just totally banned the use of collected water for potable uses. So you've straightened us out on that just with your answer there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my understanding only a couple of years ago that it wasn't an option that they want to look at. Yeah. But now that the province has given them some tools to do it, it's now an option.
Yeah. So any question, David?
Yeah, thank you, Will. And Greg, thanks a lot. And now we had a discussion at council about this. It was probably our last meeting about how, you know, with the climate getting hotter and drier in the summer and the potential for fires and so on, and water shortages, should we be trying to encourage this more or enforce it? You said earlier, you know, people can do this, but we can't enforce it. In the discussion, we talked about, well, how that might happen, but also, is it really that useful? Because, you know, it's mainly for garden areas and not all properties would have a need for a whole lot of work in their garden or water in their garden. So any thoughts about that, about where it would be useful, where it wouldn't be useful, what mechanisms we might try bringing into practice?
Well, one thought I just had now is when properties are on municipal water systems, because it's a municipally controlled water system, there might be a way to require rainwater catchment for non-potable uses. That might be an option to look at, because when you manage the supply of the water, you can possibly put some terms into how it's used. Same goes, I'm not sure how the municipal systems work for swimming pools. I'm on the Common Point system myself, and I know you can't fill swimming pools from the Common Point water supply either. You have to provide your own. I would strongly encourage that swimming pools not be used by any, filled with any potable water system on the islands. That might be something. New construction is where new bylaws can come into place, but also the education piece of how to utilize municipal water, but also well water, because they come from aquifers. It's not just one person's water, it's a shared water system. So you're drawing out of the aquifer that everybody else uses. So providing education on how that can be done. I'm seeing more and more of it in certain projects that are utilizing it, but that might be a way to encourage existing properties to utilize it more. And then with new construction, of course, especially on water systems, I think any water system, even once Cove Bay is up and running, that's going to be a high demand system that should be controlled in some way. So that's, I think, where a good place to start would be, because the little I know about the water systems, I think if the municipality can manage them, they can also manage what they can be used for.
Interesting, thanks. It looks like it's prompted more questions. I see other hands up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I see Don and McKaylee.
I just wanted to know if the new buildings, the community center and the Birch are being considered for water catchment systems, mainly for toilets and things for the municipal buildings. And then another thought that I had was the fire hall, the new fire hall, using the water catchment systems to fill the trucks. I wanted to know if that had been looked at.
Those are great questions. I don't know if they are. I don't know if the fire hall, no. I know where the water is going for that. If I can make more inquiries about the community center, but those are great questions I can follow up on for sure.
Okay, thanks, McKaylee. Anything more?
Yeah, I had basically the same question, but I would like to tag the guard letter to that. And I'm just curious, how do we set policy for rainwater capture when the municipality doesn't do it?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. Are you asking me for an answer for me?
No, I don't mean to put you.
That's a great question. I agree.
It's a general question, and it dovetails into the last in terms of how do we set a good example?
Yeah, exactly. The balance would be finding ways to utilize water catchment and then cost nothing, because we have to always think of the budgets, because as soon as the infrastructure goes in of any degree, the question is, well, who's paying for it? But that's a great question to have on such a large footprint building, what the water is going to be used for. If it's just otherwise just put it into the ground. But demonstrating proper use of it. I do it at my house, but not many people see that.
Yeah.
But on our buildings, we should demonstrate that at all times if we can.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
The other thing that comes when you mention the fire hall, I also think of climate change with the greater chance for forest fires, and one of the techniques that people in many communities have used is they rush out and put a sprinkler on the roof when there's a fire coming by, and I would think that a cistern full of collected fire rainwater would be a very useful thing to have for communities facing that kind of threat. So I'm just wondering if maybe in the future new buildings should have a cistern that's designed as to help with firefighting. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but also I would look at it from another way of requiring non-combustible roof materials.
Yeah.
Many buildings are already built that way. Luckily, it's been a trend to using metal roofing and all composite roofing. That would be because that's what the sprinkler does. It stops the spread of the roof fire igniting on the roof.
Yeah.
It's not the cladding or perimeter.
Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm. But that would be a good way to approach that. I think in new development is a lot easier to do, but encouragement and recognition and education around non-combustible materials.
I see McKaylee's hand up.
Many of the older houses here on Bowen also have a water catchment system that they use for fire as well. Our neighbor actually has like a huge pit in their backyard that was basically intended for tapping into if there was ever a fire.
So any more questions about water catchment on Bowen? I don't, Maureen.
Yeah, the topic wasn't just restricted to water catchment. It had to do with water conservation mechanisms. And one of the things that motivates people to conserve water is if it costs more. And at the council discussion, there was a brief discussion of changes to the fee schedules for potable water. And my understanding is that the CFO is looking more closely at that, and we'll see what happens later in the fall. Also, I wanted to just mention, if we look at our work plan for the year, there's a ton of stuff on there that we as a committee have committed to with regard to water conservation, and maybe we better double check on what the existing commitments are in this area, because some of them are a little bit behind schedule.
All right. Well, Greg, we might be ready to release you.
Okay, I had all the right answers. Thank you.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
But I'll do a little more research on some of these community municipal buildings. I think that's a great question. I'll follow up with that, and I'll let the committee know.
Great, thank you.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking for me.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yep,
bye now. Okay. So sustainable community grants, Bonny?
That's sort of part of the CARIP, so that's being deferred.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, committees and council, Councillor Hawking and Nicholson.
The one thing that we've already talked about, the water, the letter from the Garden Club, we discussed it at council. Everybody said they looked at their videos and recognized they were really great. I think we're pretty well covered. But Maureen, did we also agree that the tricky part about requiring it is, we can't require it right now. There's some mechanisms we could use to require it, but it would be turn the whole island into a DPA and saying you have to have it or something like that. But did we not agree, Maureen, that we would talk about it at our strategic planning session, or did we not? We did, didn't we?
Yes, we did, in part because a water master plan has been discussed for some time. It was not funded a year or so ago. What ended up happening was the various improvements and the various in different municipal water systems. I think there's a recognition that it's important to do, but not the bandwidth in the short run.
No. Okay. I don't have any other updates beyond that, but okay. I don't know, Maureen, things often slip through my mind thinking about this. Nothing else came up.
Well, there was discussion that some years ago, we as a municipality adopted the Metro Vancouver water guidelines.
Yeah.
And that was done in 2015 at a time when we actually didn't have any conservation guidelines, and it was seen as a way to profile the need. And it also was kind of fun. Those of you who were around at that time, we had a competition and ended up with 3 different posters, one of which was done by a kid. You remember, Bonny? And we circulated those to raise awareness. And then shortly after that, we had enough really bad summers that awareness raising wasn't really a priority. The weather alone was doing the awareness raising for us. But trying to come up with some specifics, along the lines of, I think, what we were anticipating when we developed the committee work plan about what people could do to reduce their water consumption. That was their goal. I think there was an appetite on the part of council to see what could be done there. Not necessarily at the level of a water master plan or a water policy in the short run, but just sort of the kinds of initiatives that we did back in 2015. And also there was revisiting the water guidelines, our water guidelines, to bring them more into line with what Metro's done in recent years, because they have become more stringent. Yeah. And we're working with the old version.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Any comments from or questions from committee members? Well,
I wanted to point out that the Schedule B4 that's being used, I think it's on the OCP, that has the community watersheds mapped on them. I think those come from an Environment Canada or a provincial layer, and they're not very accurate. They don't include watersheds along the way watersheds should be defined. They basically cut contours in half and things like that. So if that's being used as planning or for planning purposes, they need to be updated and corrected or revised as well. Oh, okay.
Thank you, McKaylee. I've looked at those and wondered how they were constructed. Bonny.
Yeah, our mapping is old. All of our schedule maps are old.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, we're going to be doing. McKaylee's just fantastic with letting staff know about on the ground how creeks are there that aren't mapped, or creeks are mapped that, yeah, anyway, the reverse. So we are going to be doing some changes, like a mass sort of update, but there's a lot of things have changed since that mapping was done.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move on? All right. Updates from Bonny. Staff updates.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that there is a nest. There hasn't been any fledglings or chicks seen yet, but there is definitely an oyster catcher who's sitting on its nest on Onion Island.
Oh.
So great. And the photo that one of our dear residents sent was really grainy, but you could see the oyster catcher sitting on its nest. So they're keeping close tabs on it. And yeah, hopefully, you know, no dogs or people will disturb or other animals will disturb the eggs. So that was just the really good news. And yeah. And then the other that I had was the Mount Gardner process, that's another agenda item now. So I think I'll stop with that. I have a few other bits and pieces, but I'm conscious of the time here. So yeah.
Okay, great.
And Will, I'm sorry, my computer is about to end its power. It's suddenly flashing red and I'm about to die. And I'm not at home. Yeah, sorry, my computer is about to die and I'm not at home and I've got no power cord. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, it's going to die any second. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, too bad, David, but we'll keep you as long as you can.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to do a really quick report on the subcommittee for natural assets inventory on Bowen Island. Basically, little has happened. The committee is Jeff, McKaylee and me, and we haven't had a meeting yet because I haven't called one because but I have done a little bit of research and found that there is a great source of information, the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative. It's a Canadian organization that has a bunch of workbooks and courses for staff and other interested people, and I think and also case studies from small communities and large communities that have moved forward. So I'm going to be sharing that with the other committee members. We'll have a meeting and we'll start moving forward. So that's it in a nutshell. So next, new business, I guess, is
yeah, the new business would be the Mount Gardner update.
Yeah, and that's I've got some stuff, and Bonny was there too. So I'm just trying to find my notes. There we go. So, as you know, the Recreation Sites and Trails BC emailed an invitation to for up to 4 members of ECAAC to attend the meeting on Wednesday evening. Only 2 of us were available, and so we went. It was Dawn and I went, and we're both very dissatisfied with the process. And I'll just run through a few things. Key areas of dissatisfaction. Only 1 workshop was planned. Numerous people, qualified people, like I would love to have seen Jeff and McKaylee attend, and others from other groups were unavailable. So they only had 1 workshop on a Wednesday evening. Didn't work for lots of people. Although most groups were invited to participate, most of them did not support motorized vehicles, but the events and section questions were skewed towards motorized vehicles. Dawn, do you have any comments on that?
Only one. I was thinking of an analogy, and most of the questions were skewed in such a way that they would be asked. You would be asked, "I know you don't eat meat, but how would you like your steak?" And meaning most of the questions were skewed in favor of vehicles. So I thought the whole process was skewed funnily.
Yeah,
very oddly.
Yeah, and the language was even skewed. One example is the term for trail access points that they used was staging areas, not trailheads.
Yeah.
So, you know, a staging area is where you park your vehicle and unload your equipment. So, and the other thing that was quite upsetting was the staff there will only consider input regarding Mount Gardner recreation site, not the island as a whole, so that they were discounting all the motorized vehicle trails on Radar Hill. And so they weren't thinking of the island as a unit. They were restricting it to and treating it like the only recreation site that was being used by Bowen Islanders was Mount Gardner. And so they wanted to make sure that those motorized people had a say. And so even though they're dominating other sites, there's very little emphasis on environment and natural asset stewardship, little to no reference to BIM's resolution against motorized vehicles, little to no discussion on the impact of motorized vehicles on the visitor experience of people using the trails. Participation was limited to community groups. People living nearby Mount Gardner were not invited to participate. I was told that they would be consulted after the plan had been made. And in this term, consulted means they would be able to comment on the final product. So they didn't have a chance to have input about things that were going to affect their lives. Recreation sites and trails staff indicated that the resolution from BIM didn't really matter because it was their land, and so they could do what they wanted with it. No detailed discussion on off-road vehicle impact on wildlife habitat and ecology or sensitive areas. One last. And so that's it. I would like to hear from Bonny, who was there too. And I have a motion that I'd like to make as well. So Bonny?
Yeah, I was there just as a representative for the municipality to help out if need be. Definitely wasn't running the show there, and it was very good for me to observe and to hear what was going on in the room. I just wanted to say that Brian Mitchell from Recreational Sites and Trails BC, who's based out of Smithers, is appearing at council meeting on June 13th. So next Monday evening, he's appearing as a delegation, and he's going to be talking to council about the process, where we're at now, because to date, council has not been able to weigh in. He said that round one was the key, the individuals meetings, telephone meetings. Round two was this session. We're moving into round three, as I understood it, which will involve a further afield. That was my understanding, but we'll get clarity. Council will get clarity on Monday night. I don't think the representation, it was a tricky night for a lot of people. So yeah, I think there would have been if there had been the opportunity for even an online consultative event, that we would have had a better representation. The motorized group was well represented there. There were 5 members of the motorized group, and some of the, as I say, ECAAC, there were 2 because of people's commitments. And I don't doubt that everybody is, cares about what happens at Mount Gardner, but it's just life happens. So, yeah. So, yeah, I think that's all I'll say at this point. I've made my, sort of reiterated council standpoint to Brian Mitchell many times, as has Liam. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd like to make a motion that ECAAC recommends that council reaffirm their resolution recommending that the province ban the use of off-road vehicles on all trails on Mount Gardner, and that trail planning on Mount Gardner be done in concert with planning for trails on all crown blocks of Bowen Island.
Can you send me that?
I can.
Michaela's got her hand up, and I know Rebecca did too. I wonder if it's
Yep.
worth hearing from the 2 of them before
Definitely.
they're considering.
Bonnie actually answered my question. It was about where we are in the process and the timeline for the final product, whatever that's going to be. So thank you.
Yeah, the decision they're hoping to have in the fall. So the statement that Robert van der Zam came out with when was that? About, I don't know when that was. Was it late 2021 or early 2022? It was late 2021 or early 2022. Anyway, that was not a statutory decision. That was a statement, I guess. So the statutory decision would be made in the fall. That's what they're aiming for.
Michaela, yeah. Go ahead.
I had a couple of questions. One of them was that whether or not there was any discussion about enforcement. I'm specifically thinking about the noise bylaw, and if the bylaw officers would then be expected to, I guess, police or enforce that for residents in the area.
It was never brought up.
Not even once. All right. And then another thing is the drainages that flow into Killarney Lake are tributary to fish bearing. And so if there's any crossings associated with these things will impact fish habitat, fish and fish habitat. And even if they're not connected to Killarney Lake, they will be subject to the Water Sustainability Act. Has there been any discussion around how they would go about getting their permits for trail building and things in those areas?
No.
Yeah, I would add there was very little information or very none of the questions were really environmentally focused, which I would just add to that. The tone from Brian was very dismissive about the municipality's letters to the government, which I found very disturbing.
So
have you lost me?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, all right.
Steph, I've emailed you.
My internet is unstable.
I'll have one more question. I don't think it has a bearing on your motion, Will, but I'm just curious. Okay, so it sounds like so far they're operating on the assumption that there will be motorized use. At least that's the approach. Was there discussion around designated uses of certain and existing trails, or will they all be multi-use, or is there an assumption that this is a motorized trail and there's a separation of users in the recreation site, whatever you want to call it?
The map that Brian sent to us has 2 designations. There's shared use and pedestrian only. And most of the trails are designated shared use. another way of that the bias was shown was in the session that Brian facilitated. The first question was, if there's going to be one trail for pedestrian use only, which would it be?
Okay.
And so that's when I challenged him. But and anyway, it was skewed. So Steph, you've got my motion. I would be really hoping that the motion could get to council for their meeting. Bonnie?
Yeah, I just, I guess I understand the rationale about wanting to look at the island holistically. Believe me, I understand that. But I do understand that Recreational Sites and Trails BC's mandate, right or wrong, is recreational sites and trails, which is Mount Gardner. It is not Radar Hill and it is not Mount Collins. So I think right now, I think it's very clear. I mean, I was there. I also know, and I just want to point this out, there is another tactic. I'm not saying that this is what was going on in that meeting, but because Brian is very aware, and I've had quite a few conversations with him, that the overwhelming sentiment on the island is for non-motorized use, or at least that's what he saw all the letters. He's very aware of what's gone on in the past. There is a group on the island that has done some work on Mount Gardner on trails and wants to utilize part of the mountain or all of the mountain for motorized use. He's also aware of that, but he really wanted to hear their voice, as I do think he wanted to hear everybody's. I'm not saying the process wasn't, the process was not perfect. The session was not, it was lackluster, but I do believe in the process. And I understand why you want to include the other parts. Brian is very well aware. He actually was up at Radar Hill the day after the session. He is aware that the motorized group uses that area as well. So I don't think that, I don't want to muddy the waters, so to speak. And jurisdictionally, I don't believe it's, I want to see the process go through, and I'm hopeful for a good outcome. I mean, I may be completely naive, but I'm hopeful for a good outcome. So I think reiterating the stance of this committee would be fine. I don't know, and I'm being completely honest about dragging the other bits in. I think it might complicate things quite a bit. I think it's important to state that there are other areas for motorized and that they can be looked at a later time. But I think keeping Mount Gardner as it is a recreational sites and trail, and that's their mandate, is recreational sites and trails, polygons.
Hey, Bonnie, I think your points are useful because you've got more information. You've had more conversations with the management organization. So I think we should definitely take your points in consideration. I see Don had his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is a slippery slope. You know, Bowen Island is not Tulameen. You know, Tulameen has unlimited space to fool around in motorized vehicles, where Bowen doesn't. And what worried me most was the way the questions were skewed at that meeting. If that's the way they are approaching this issue, you know, I think we could potentially have a problem. Because it's weighted in favor of the motorized vehicles or multi-purpose use. It's not weighted in favor of the will of the people or the will of the majority of Bowen Island residents. So I think it's important that we have a voice, that we are clear, very clear about about how we feel about it. That's all.
The other point I'm going to add is Brian had included with his invitation an outline of his process, and his decision-making tool is interesting. I think it's pretty opaque. I'm sorry, I can't remember the title of it. If you look through that document, it's got a little graphic beside it that, frankly, as someone who does graphics, without an explanation of what that graphic is all about, it's a meaningless graphic. But so I went to the website that Brian had. Well, what Brian had said in his document was, if you want to know more about this decision-making tool, look it up on the internet. And that's all his reference was. So I did look it up, and it's a method of making decisions that are a compromise to all input. It's not consensus. It's a compromise, and I'm worried that the compromise might be that there will be motorized vehicles on Bowen. So what I'm willing to suggest for this motion is we scrap the section about Radar Hill and just ask the municipality, the council, to reiterate to the BC government that we are that the municipality is strongly opposed. Maureen, sorry, you've had your hand up for a while, I suppose.
No, that's okay. I appreciate your elaboration, and I really appreciate the list of concerns that you went through. That's really very helpful context for the delegation on Monday. With the motion, I've got the motion in front of me. Steph shared it with me, and maybe we could just look at it again. Can it be brought up on screen?
Yes, an editor. Yes, go for it.
Yeah. No, it's just to anchor it a little bit more. Where are you, Steph? Are you hanging around? I can't see you.
I'm here. I just shared screen and it gave me something else. So I'm just getting it on top of the document.
Gave you YouTube. Yeah. Just if we can sharpen up the reference, because it's not that council strongly opposes or recommending that the province ban. It's the language is firmer than that, and
Okay.
quite intentionally so.
Yeah.
Let me just, okay, so the resolution, and Steph, if you could work this in, it's resolution 2276, requesting that the province prohibit motorized vehicle use on Mount Gardner. And that went through, I remember the discussion at council was pretty lengthy around getting to just the outright statement of prohibiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have to say, other than again reiterating thank you for the detailed critique that you provided.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a motion there. I would like to move that motion. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second, Jeff.
Jeff? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. And Steph, will this get to council for that meeting on the 13th?
No. Unless, yes,
I like the yes.
I can rush it,
Thank you.
call in some favors. Is that the request?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Do we have anything else to do in this meeting? I don't think so. So thank you, everyone. It was a long one, but I think we got some good things done. And Rebecca, how was the birthday party?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was very
Excellent.
nice. Thank you. Yeah, sorry I couldn't join you.
Yeah. See, these life comes in the way of all of us.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad that it went well. And Jeff, I'm glad to see your. I think you picked up your bed and walked. You're looking very healthy and ready to go.
I'm healthy again. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if there was, I intend to look through the bylaw that Daniel presented and provide comments to him, but is there any other opportunity? Is he going to come back and speak on it, or should I wait, or? Sorry, I wasn't here.
There an open house?
Yeah.
I would suggest you contact Daniel. Is that kosher, Maury, to do
Yeah,
that?
it's kosher, and I suspect that he won't be coming back, because when he brought this to council, it was bringing it back to the committees that had been significantly involved to show them how it had developed. There wasn't the expectation of a huge amount of it.
Okay, all right. So I'll take a read through it and email him any questions or concerns.
Thanks,
Okay.
McKilly. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thanks, everyone. Have a time to get out in the sun if you can.
Great.
Thank you.
Going away.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.